Today we are going to look at another accounting standard, which I would say is relatively important, but it's not a standard where it might be tested at a greater extent in your examination, but there might be questions here and there, might be an MCQ or might be uh, part of an adjustment of the question number one, or maybe a small essay type question. So it can come in any form, but as far as the topic is concerned, it's not that much um, big enough. It has been tested in the past, but there had been one or two instances where there had been one full question for 20 marks. But that was also very easy question. You will understand maybe towards the latter part we will do that question. Other than that, most of the questions have been very simple, right? But the theoretical aspect of the standard is very important because there are a lot of concepts, definitions which you might need to know. Sometimes you might be asked to write short notes, or maybe part of an essay question. It could be tested, right? So the standard that we are going to talk about is LKAS 1616, right? So the standard actually explains the accounting treatment for property, plant and equipment. So last week we looked at investment property, which was LKS 40. Now this week we are going to look at what is property, plant and equipment for an organization. Now when I say organization may vary from one to the other. There could be trading organizations, there could be manufacturing organizations, or there could be like banking institutions. So depending on the type of the organization, the property, plant and equipment may also vary, right? So we need to understand what is property, what is meant by plant and what is meant by equipment. So last week we looked at investment property, where I told you land and buildings of a particular organization belongs to the category of property. So which means any land owned by the business, or any building that is owned by the business, or it could be land and building, whatever the type of it is classified as property as far as the business is concerned. Then when we look at what are plants, so for an organization like a manufacturing organization, there could be a plant. This plant will look after the manufacturing part of the organization. The manufacturing organization will look after the plant that they have set up to look after the manufacturing process. Say for example, there could be like we sometimes call water plants. Water plants means where like there is a company which purifies water. So this water purification happens in a particular plant. We call that it's a huge space where there might be a lot of machineries involved. So that type of a setup is known as a plant. Then the last type is, we call it as equipment. Now this equipment category is very vast, because whatever that we have classified as land and building will fall into the property. Whatever that you have classified as machine space and the machinery, large machinery, will fall into the category of plant. All other fixed assets that you may have will fall into the category of equipment. But generally we consider equipment are like something in the form of a machinery or electronic type of piece of a machine. Something is known as equipment, but here it is not the case, because that is how the broader classification is. Now, if I am to go into detail into the category of equipment, you might see there could be furniture, tables and chairs. Then there could be cupboards, for example, I'm telling you. Then there could be electronic items. Say, for example, some companies might have televisions. Some companies might have um, micro, microphone systems or PABX systems. And more importantly, you also might have computers. Now, these computers are also part of the equipment category. So that is why we call it as property, plant and equipment for an organization. In shorter form, we say PPE. So maybe going forward, I might use the term PPE. So what does it mean? It means property, plant and equipment. Now, when it comes to this property, we have already looked at what is an investment property is. That is what we looked at last week. Now, what we are going to look at is the next type of property, which also includes plant and equipment. Okay. So generally, we call this as the property owned by the business. Now, if you can recall what we learned last week, where under the exception we said any owner occupied property will not form part of investment property, because why they have an owner occupied property is to be used in business purposes, administrative purposes. So it doesn't fall into the category of investment property. So the main features of accounting for PPE includes, as mentioned, recognition of the asset. Now you have to take the value of this PPE into your books of accounts. So what is the value that you will consider? That is called recognition. Secondly, determination of its carrying amount. I explained you what is carrying amount and investment property. So it is the same here also. Depreciation made. This is the new topic that we are going to learn under this. Now, under investment property, we never discussed this. But under LKS 16, on property, plant and equipment, we will look at what is depreciation is. What is depreciation is. Then we also have an extended term. We call it as impairment loss. Generally, I take the impairment topic towards the last part of the course, because that is where we heading up to the preparation of financial statements. Okay, but what we will do here is we will just touch upon what is impairment, and because it is covered by the standard. So let's look at the scope of this particular standard. Now the standard that we are looking at is LKAS 16, okay, which talks about the property, plant and equipment. What does the scope says? LKS 16 should be followed when accounting for PPE unless another Sri Lanka accounting standard requires a different treatment. So it's very clear. When can you use LKS 16? When there is no other standard covering this particular class of asset. Say, for example, if you have an investment property in your business. So knowingly that you have an investment property, you can't go and apply LKS 16 for that particular property, because investment property is already covered by LKS 41. That is what we looked at last week. So knowingly a particular piece or class of asset is covered by another standard, you should not apply LKS 16. And like in the case of investment property, here also we say that LKS 16 does not apply to the following, which is the exception. Number one, biological assets related to agriculture activity. I told you, tea plantations are not covered under property, plant and equipment. Those are not relevant. Mineral reservoirs, it's not relevant under LKS 16. Okay, that is what called mineral rights and mineral reserves, such as oil refineries, gas and other non-regenerative resources. So when you have all these, say for example, a company in Middle East owning some oil reserves or mineral reserves, means those are not property, plant and equipment for them. Those are their business assets. But if somebody has a physically identifiable asset, then it will become a fixed asset, which will be covered by LKS 16. Then you will have PPE classified as held for sale. What do you mean by PPE classified as held for sale is where you will have some plot of land. You might be holding it for resale. So if it is for resale, then you can't classify it under LKS 16. So those are some of the exceptions. Of course, you should not include the investment property also under this standard. Right, definition. Any questions up to now? If you have any questions, please ask. Or you can raise your questions in the chat box. No questions? Right, let's proceed. So what is property, plant and equipment? The definition. Property, plant and equipment is all tangible assets that are held for use in the production or supply of goods and services, or for rental or others, or for administrative purposes. Now, property, plant and equipment, you have already know this. What do you mean by that? All tangible assets that are held for use in the production or supply of goods or services, for rental or others, or for administrative purposes. And these assets are expected to be used during more than one period. Now, this is where you need to understand very carefully. Now, why we consider property, plant and equipment are very, very important assets as far as the business is concerned. These are expected to be used during more than one period. Now, when you say more than one period, they are referring to the financial year. So a company might purchase a fixed asset and it might use it for more than one financial year. More than one financial year. So basically, it might run into 2 or 3 or more than 2 years. Okay. So why we call it as property, plant and equipment is because it is a tangible asset that is held for the use in the production or supply of goods or services. Secondly, those assets are expected to be used during more than one period. Now, since we are expected to use it for more than one period only, we need to depreciate these assets. We need to depreciate these assets. So cost and fair value, I think we have already spoken about it under investment properties. So what is cost? Cost is the amount of cash or cash equivalent paid or the fair value of other consideration given to acquire an asset at the time of its acquisition or construction. So what do you mean by cost? Cost is the value that you may pay. Now you go to a showroom. Let's say I take an example. Let's say you go to the Abans showroom and you are very keen to buy a television. So when you go and check with the shop agent with regard to the price, they say it is worth 150,000. Now you pay 150,000 and you buy it, or you purchase it, or you acquire it. Now what happens here? In order to acquire that asset, you pay 150,000. This 150,000 is known the consideration or value that you have paid to acquire the asset. And that value is considered as the cost. Now, what is fair value? Fair value is the amount for which an asset could be exchanged between knowledgeable, willing parties in an arm's length transaction. So I explained this in detail last week. What do you mean by that? There has to be two parties. Those two parties have to be knowledgeable and they must be willing to transact between them. And if so, the value that they decide to exchange for this transaction is going to be considered as fair value. So the obvious example that we can have is, let's say you are trying to sell a house. So you look for buyers. There may be several buyers. Some of them will come and ask for a lower price. You might be wanting to sell it at a higher price. So there might be some point where you strike a balance. The price that you want and the price that they want to buy strikes. So that becomes the more realistic fair value of the particular product or asset. So as a result, fair value is the amount for which an asset could be exchanged between knowledgeable, willing parties. Okay? In an arm's length transaction means where you have to have the control over the transaction. It shouldn't be because of influence. It shouldn't be under threat. It's a free flow transaction. That's what we mean as arm's length transaction. Then we come to an important term which we call it as useful life. Now, you know, for people, there are different age brackets. Say, generally known like how long the male will live, how long the female will live. So those are like estimated lifetimes that we consider when it comes to real life of human. But what we are talking here is something different, which means what is the expected lifetime of the asset that you have purchased? Or in other words, the period over which a depreciable asset is expected to be used by the entity. Expected to be used by the entity. So, if you have purchased an asset, then you should have an idea about for how long you expect this asset to be used. Sometimes you might say it can be used for 3 years without any trouble. Or it could be used for 6 years without any trouble. So what are we trying to establish here is what is the best estimation with regard to the useful life of an asset? Why this particular useful life is important is because you are going to depreciate the asset using that parameter. You are going to depreciate the asset using that particular parameter. Sometimes this useful life can be determined in a different manner. Say, for example, you are in a manufacturing organization. You are in a manufacturing organization. So in a manufacturing organization, these huge machines operate. So for those type of machines, sometimes you may not be able to estimate how long this machine can operate. How long these machines can operate. Therefore, we need to look for some different mechanism to estimate the useful life. How do we estimate it? The best and known estimate of this kind would be to look at how many units can this machine produce at a time. So rather than talking in terms of number of years, here we will talk about in terms of number of units. Whether I can produce 50,000 units out of this machine before this machine starts giving me trouble. Or can it be 100,000 units before this machine starts giving me problems? So that is also going to be taken as one of the mechanisms to determine the useful life. So it need not be always in terms of time, but it could be also in terms of parameters such as these. Residual value. Residual value is the net amount which the entity expects to obtain for an asset at the end of its useful life. That means if you look at an asset and you estimate it that it can be used for 3 years, let's say, after using it for 3 years, ideally speaking, you should replace it. You should buy a new asset and replace the old asset. Replace the old asset. So, at the time of replacing the old asset with a new asset, what is the value that you expect that this particular asset will have? We normally call it as the disposal value. The disposal value. So, residual value can be either through disposal, or it could be a estimate judged by the management. Judged by the management. Now we come to the term depreciable amount. Depreciable amount. It is the cost of an asset or other amount substituted for cost less its residual value. So now you already know what is cost is. Now you know what is a residual value is. So the difference between the two values is known as a depreciable amount. Depreciable amount. The value which will be subject to wear and tear. If you have the handout with you, please underline the term wear and tear. Wear and tear. Very important. Because as and when you use a particular asset, it deteriorates in value over a period of time. For example, let us imagine that you are using a mobile phone. Now, along with the usage of the mobile phone, there will be certain amount of wear and tear. It can't be the same original mobile phone that you purchased 2 years ago. With the usage, it might reduce in value. It might reduce in value. So that reduction in value has to be accounted. Has to be accounted. How do we account it is what you call as depreciation. How you account for the wear and tear is known as depreciation. So depreciation is the result of systematic allocation of the depreciable amount of an asset over its estimated useful life. It might look like more technical, but it's a very simple and straightforward formula. Depreciation for the accounting period is charged to the net profit or loss for the period either directly or indirectly. So now we come to a point where you are going to incur an expense. This depreciation is known as an expense. But in order to incur this expense, you are not going to spend anything. There is no cash involved. For example, if you are to incur electricity, you have to pay the electricity bill. So there will be cash involved. But when it comes to depreciation, there is no involvement of cash. Therefore, we call it as a book entry. Depreciation is provided as a book entry. So carrying amount, I have already explained to you last week. It is the amount at which an asset is recognized in the statement of financial position after deducting any accumulated depreciation and accumulated impairment losses. Entity specific value is the total amount of the estimated cash inflow from the usage of the asset within its useful lifetime and the estimated residual value of the asset. So this is something little technical when it comes to the entity specific value. Right. So before we move on with the next few slides, I just want to take you through these terminologies that we learned. So I hope you can see the board. Right. Now we were talking about a fixed asset. Let's say you purchase a computer for your organization. You purchase a computer for your organization. I hope the board is visible to you all. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Right. So let us assume that you are going and purchasing a computer and you pay ₹150,000, just for example. So now this computer is going to be used in your business, in your office premises. You are going to use this. Now this 150,000 that you paid is the amount that you paid in cash or cash equivalent, or we call it as the consideration. The consideration that you gave. The consideration that you pay. Right. Now we bring it to the organization and we need to account for this. So what has happened? There is an accounting entry that is going to get generated. You need to debit somewhere and credit somewhere. So the credit is obviously cash, isn't it? Because I paid cash. The debit, I will come to that later when we look at the accounting entries, but basically this is going to be an asset account. This is going to be an asset account. So the asset is now available in your office for use in the business. For use in the business. Now we look at the terminologies. So what are the terminologies? First thing, the cost. So what is the cost? We said the amount that you pay, the amount that you paid for this particular computer. So cost is 150,000. Right? Cost is 150,000. Secondly, we looked at a term called fair value. Fair value. So if this is the normal price of a computer of this kind, or a laptop, let's say this is a laptop. So if it is a normal price of this computer, then your fair value also will be 150,000. But for business purposes, what we are required to consider is the cost. Right? So we are not worried about the fair value at this moment of time. Fair value. So after bringing in this computer and start using it, you check from your experts in your organization and you try to identify how long this computer can be used. For how long this computer can be used. So some people say 5 years, some people say 2 years, right? There are different answers. But at the end of the day, you decide, okay, this computer can be used for, let's say, 4 years. Now this is a judgment. You assume that this computer can be used for 4 years. After 4 years, you might have to replace this computer with a new one. So if that is the case, we will say the useful life of this asset or the computer will be 4 years. Useful life of this computer will be 4 years. 4 years. Right? So now we are going to take you into the future. So you purchased it today, let's say 2021, and we are in October, let's say October. Right. Now 4 years down the line, you reach 4 years down the line. So that is 25 October. 4 years are done. Now you look at this computer, the computer is still in good condition. So you might have to make a decision. Either you continue to use it, or you get rid of this computer and you buy a new one. Both the options are available to you. Either you get rid of this computer, or you can continue to use this computer until you buy a new one. So suppose if you want to get rid of this computer and you want to give it for somebody at a price. So you check everywhere and there was one person ready to buy this computer at rupees 30,000. Let's say one person is ready to buy this computer at rupees 30,000. But still you haven't sold this. So if that is the case, this organization might have done this in previous occasions as well. So over the years, through practice, sometimes you know that after using a computer for 4 years, I will be able to sell it somewhere around for 30 rupees. So if that is the case, that 30,000 rupees becomes your residual value. Your residual value. So the residual value is actually not a known amount. It could be over the years by practice you decide, or it could be based on the management judgment. Based on the management judgment, you decide, okay, the residual value for computers will be 30,000. What does it mean? From the date of purchase, after completing the useful life of the asset, I might be able to sell this for 30,000. Sell this for 30,000. Right. So now we know the cost, the fair value, useful life, and the residual value. Now we look at the depreciable amount. Depreciable amount. So what is depreciable amount is actually equivalent to cost minus the residual value. Cost minus the residual value. So my cost is 150,000. Residual value is 30,000. So my depreciable amount will be 120,000. 120,000. Very, very important. You need to know this. So what is your depreciable amount? Depreciable amount is cost minus residual value. Cost minus residual value. So this 120,000 is the amount that I am going to depreciate. Depreciate. Over a period of 4 years. Over a period of 4 years. And that is what you call as depreciation. The amount of the amount that you are going to debit your P&L by depreciating is known as the amount of depreciation. Amount of depreciation. So what we are going to look at next is what are the methods available to depreciate. But before that, if you have any questions, please ask after taking down this. You can take down this and you can ask any questions if you have. Do you have any questions? You can ask. Okay, is that clear? Any questions? Please take down this. This example will give you an idea. Like when an asset is purchased, what is the cost? What is the fair value? How do we determine the useful life? What is called the residual value? And what is the depreciable amount? And what is going to be depreciated? Okay? Right. Shall we proceed with the... Right. So let me share the screen once again. So those are the definitions. Okay. So what do we talk about depreciation? Now, in order to depreciate an asset, the first thing that we need to identify is the depreciation rate. So what do you mean by depreciation rate is, now we understood that an asset needs to be depreciated over a period of its useful life. Now for you to do it, what you need to do, you need to find out a percentage which is known as depreciation rate, which is known as the depreciation rate. How do we determine the depreciation rate? Depreciation rate is calculated by dividing the number 1 by the useful life of years. Now this is in terms of years that we need to talk about. So the useful life has to be in terms of years, and 1 divided by the useful life into 100 will give you the depreciation rate. Depreciation rate. So what is annual depreciation? Annual depreciation means, now we said an asset needs to be depreciated over its useful life. So if that is the case, how much should be the depreciation per year? What is the amount that needs to be depreciated per year? That is known as annual depreciation. So the annual depreciation is calculated by cost minus residual value, which you know the depreciable amount, into the depreciation rate. So these two formulas you have to remember. I don't think that it will be given in the examination. Up to now, in any of the examination, it was given. So either you have to practice and keep it in memory, or you have to memorize it. One of the two options have to be taken, because this formula is very, very important when you do questions in the examination. Okay. Right. So
Excuse
the-
me.
yes,
Excuse me. Now, with respect to useful life, sir,
yeah,
is there a specific method for accounting purposes? How do we calculate the, let's say it's a computer, how do we
yes.
calculate the number of years useful life? Is there a specific method, sir?
No, useful life is actually determined through experience. Now, say if it is a start of business, what they will do is they will get hold of somebody or maybe some accounting experts, and they will determine a useful life at the beginning. But what happens is this useful life has to be reviewed maybe once in every 3 years or 4 years. You have to review it. So what do you mean by review is you have to actually see how you use these assets in your business. Now, sometimes, let's say you assume that the useful life of computers is 4 years, but due to the usage of your business in the usage of the computer in your business, all the computers get either damaged or something happens in 2 years time. So if that is the case, you can't continue to say that useful life is 4 years. You have to change it to 2 years. Okay. So it's a very valid question. What you asked is a very valid question. So how you determine the useful life of a asset in a particular business is where you need to check on your assets over a period of time and determine it by way of your experience. Now, say for example, you might have tables and chairs. So how often you need to replace these tables and chairs? Is it after 5 years time or maybe after 10 years time? So likewise, you have to decide. Now, say for example, I'll take a classic example. You look at uh, banks. Now, banks use heavily the computers are used. Banks are very much dependent on computers because without the computers and computer systems, bank cannot function today. So it has come to that level because you get online banking, digital platforms, internet banking, so many things have come. So with all these, what has happened? The usage of the computer is more and more. So in such a situation, you can't say that you are going to use your computers maybe for 10 years. That's absurd. In today's context, I would say even 4 years might be too much. 3 years or maybe 3 years would be the best estimate. Or maybe you can go for 4 years, but nothing beyond that. Nothing beyond that. So it depends on the type of asset. Say, for example, if it is a, let's say, where in the banks you might have sometimes televisions being put for custom areas. Now, how long these computers might last? It is going just going to be there put down for the customers to come and view when they are in the queue. But how long these computer televisions will last? 5 years? So that could be the best. Sometimes what happens, the useful life may have to be revisited due to obsoleteness. We call it as obsoleteness. What do you mean by that? It becoming outdated. It becoming outdated. Now, it is very much common in all of us. What happens? We buy a mobile phone today. After about 2 years or maybe 3 years, to see that there are 10 or 15 models have come after that. So there is a temptation where we don't want to keep that old model with us. We immediately want to change into the new model. So apparently, what does it mean? The useful life of the asset is going to be cut down. Useful life of the asset going to be cut down. You might have seen a lot of organizations use tablet PCs, that is tablets. Now these tablet PCs are heavily used by the banks now to enroll the customer, to provide mobile services. So if that is the case, you may not be able to use the tablet PC for too long. It might need to be replaced very often. So useful life has to be determined based on the experience and how often you replace it, in the like in the case of mobile phones or whatever, right? So when it comes to IT equipment, banks are the biggest example where they are heavily replace these IT assets very frequently. Maybe your ATMs are getting replaced, CRMs are getting replaced. So many things are happening, right? But when it comes to the normal assets, where I would say normal assets means like the tables, the chairs, cupboards. So those might last for about 10 years, right? Because you don't need to replace them. But then again, the chairs that are like the revolving chairs, where you can rotate. Now, those type of chairs, you can't use it for 10 years because due to the type of usage, it might be broken very sooner. So the revolving nature of the chair, that is why we call it as revolving. Due to the revolvingness of the chair, it might get damaged very quickly. So you might not be even to use it for 5 years. Okay. So useful life is basically determined by either by way of the experience or with the usage and how often you replace it. Okay. Have I answered that question?
Yes, sir, that is fine. Thank you very much. Now,
Okay.
when it comes to residual value also, sir, let's say after 4-5 years, now for well, then now let's say now if you want to sell the computer, so then at that time only we have to see the residual value. No? So that is also
Yes.
the same scenario as per the same scenario. No? So through
Yeah.
experience in the market value, no
Yes.
any particular method. No.
Yeah. But again, you have asked a valid question. Now, the residual value need not be a must. That also I should say. So most of the organizations, what they do is, in most cases, they make the residual value to be 0, right? For simpliness, you keep it at 0. What happens? Which means you will depreciate the entire cost. Okay, because as you said, now there could be complications. How you decide this residual value, from time to time it is going to change. Now say for one computer you were able to sell it for 30, but another computer you might sell it for 20. So it might have complications like that also. So what I would say is, it is through experience that the company has to decide what is going to be the best residual value for them. But if you are unable to estimate a residual value, better to keep it at 0. Better to keep it at 0. So I think better, since you have asked a question, better let's make a note here. You can take down. Organizations may decide, you can take down, huh? Organizations may decide the residual value for PPE. The residual value for PPE, that is property, plant and equipment. Residual value for PPE based on their experience, with the usage of similar assets, or at some times you can determine by how often you replace the asset, by how often you replace the asset. Next line. As a result, residual value may become an estimate of the management based on their knowledge and experience. However, many organizations may prefer to have the residual value as zero. Okay, so this is depending on the question that you asked. I have given a small note just to say that how you determine the residual value, or you might keep the residual value at zero. It's not a mistake. For simplicity, you can keep it at zero. All right. So we are talking about the depreciation rate per annum. So which means you are calculating a rate for the year, and it is computed as a percentage. So then what we do, using that depreciation rate, we look at how much of a depreciation that we need to provide for an asset in a particular year. So that is what we are going to look at. Right. Okay. So look at the board. I have put down the formula. Right. So you have the depreciation rate per annum, which is equivalent to 1 divided by useful life into 100%. And annual depreciation is equivalent to cost minus residual value into depreciation rate. Now, what are we talking about? Cost minus residual value means this is the depreciable amount. So this is the amount that you expect to depreciate. This is the amount that you expect to depreciate. Now what happens when you make this residual value to zero? Residual value to zero. So basically you are going to depreciate the cost. So which means annual depreciation will be cost into depreciation rate. Cost into depreciation rate. So you need to note that particular point. If the residual value is zero, then your annual depreciation will be cost into depreciation rate. Okay, right. So let us do a question now. Take down. Compute the depreciation rate per annum. The depreciation rate per annum for assets having the following useful lives. Having the following useful lives. Right. So what are the numbers? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 16 years, 50 years. If you can compute quickly. I want you to compute the depreciation rates. If the useful life is this, what is the depreciation rate? So what is the formula? Depreciation rate is equivalent to 1 over useful life into 100. 1 over useful life into 100. So based on that we will calculate for 5 years. So what do you do? The depreciation rate is equivalent to 1 over 5 into 100%. So which means 20%. Second one, depreciation rate 1 over useful life, which is 10 years, into 100, which is 10%. Next one, depreciation rate 1 upon 20 years into 100, that is 5%. Next one, little tricky. Depreciation rate 1 upon 16 into 100. What is the percentage? What is the answer?
6.25, sir.
6.25.
6 point? How much? Sorry, I didn't get the answer.
6.25, sir.
6.25. The last one, 1 over 50 years into 100 gives you 2%. 2%. So what does it mean? When the useful life is a large number, it increases. When the useful life of the asset increases, the depreciation rate falls down. The depreciation rate falls down. So that is very, very important. When you increase the useful life of the asset, the depreciation rate of the asset comes down. When the depreciation rate comes down means the amount of depreciation that you will provide in the P&L will also come down. Depreciation amount also will come down. Right? Okay, next question. Second one. So I hope this is understood. There is nothing very difficult here. Let's go to the second question. Calculate the useful life of the asset. The useful life of the asset having the following depreciation rates. So now I am giving you the depreciation rates. And now I want you to calculate what are the useful lives of these assets. If you are going to use the depreciation rate of this, what is going to be the useful life of these assets? Quickly. I'll give you 2 minutes. So what are the answers? So now the question is, they are asking the useful life for these assets. It's not the depreciation rate, because depreciation rate is already given to you. So you are required to calculate the useful life of the asset. Right. So how do we calculate it? Now the question here is, what is the formula? You have to remember the formula. That's why I told you, remembering the formula is very, very important. Depreciation rate per annum is equivalent to 1 over useful life into 100. So now you are given with this. You need to find out this. So what do? You take this here and you bring this here. So automatically the formula gets inverted, which means the useful life will be equivalent to 1 over depreciation rate into 100. Okay? Useful life will be equivalent to depreciation 1 over depreciation rate into 100. So this is equivalent to 1 over 8% into 100%. And I think that will give you 12.5 years. Am I correct? 12 and a half years?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So the second one, useful life equivalent to 1 over 16.67% into 100. How much is it?
6 years.
Roughly 6 years. Roughly 6 years. Then you have 33.33% into 100. That will give you 3 years. And UL equal 1 over 4% into 100 means that is 25 years. And the last one, one over 1% into 100% gives you 100 years. Okay, so this is something to understand how you calculate the useful life, or if the useful life is given, how you calculate the depreciation rate. So sometimes these type of question might come in the MCQ, probably. Okay, that's why I just
Sir,
wanted.
can you please explain this again, sir? The
Yeah.
formula, sir.
Right. So the formula says here, depreciation rate per annum will be. That is, if you want to depreciate for a particular 1 year, that is what we call as annual depreciation. So in order for us to depreciate for one particular year, we need to know the depreciation rate per annum. Per annum means per year. So how you calculate it? 1 divided by the useful life. Now the useful life you will have already decided. The company will decide based on their experience what is the useful life for an asset. So using the useful life of the asset, you can calculate the depreciation rate per annum. How you calculate it? Depreciation rate per annum will be equivalent to 1 over useful life into 100%. So your answer will be in percentage. Alternatively, if you want to calculate or find out the useful life of an asset, given the depreciation rate, so what do? We need to invert this question formula. So depreciation rate will come here, useful life will go here. So what you do again, 1 over depreciation rate will give you the useful life. But the answer here will be in number of years. Useful life will be in number of years. You have to remember. Now, out of the answers that you calculated here for these questions that I gave, the first one was 8%. The answer you got is 12.5 years, 12.5 years. Now, can you tell me in terms of number of months, how many it is? If you say the same thing in number of months, how much is it? Yes, it will be 150. How did you get it? 12 into 12 months is 144. 0.5 years means half of the year. Half of the year is 6 months. Okay. So when you get answers here with decimal places, you have to be careful. Now in the earlier question, I think you got 6.25. So 6.25 means what? 6 years and a quarter year. 6 years and a quarter year. So quarter year means actually it's 3 months. Quarter year means it's a 3 months, right? So that you have to know. Okay, right. So those are the two formulas that we looked at. And what do you mean by annual depreciation? Annual depreciation means cost minus residual value into the depreciation rate, So whenever it is the residual value is 0, you know it is cost into depreciation rate. So in questions, sometimes what happens, they will be silent about the residual value, right? They will not give you the residual value all the time. So when they have not given, don't go behind to find out what is the residual value. It doesn't make any sense. So if the residual value, they are silent about the residual value means you will assume that the residual value is 0. Okay. So you have to remember that if the residual value is not given to you, then it means the residual value is 0. Residual value is 0. Please remember. Okay. Right. Now let's look at the recognition part of it. So the recognition of PP depends on two criteria, like what we looked at last week on the investment property. Here also it is the same thing. What is it says? It is probable that future economic benefits associated with the assets will flow to the entity. Yes, of course. When you buy a computer, you buy it for a purpose. You want to use it in the business. So when you are using it in the business, what happens? The computer is not going to bring in money, but using the computer, whatever you will do will bring you the money. So you need to understand it that manner. Okay. When you look at the definition, it is probable that future economic benefits associated with the asset will flow to the entity. Now, say for example, you have a building, right? You have a building. Now, under investment property, when you have a building, this was one of the criteria. So what did you do? You will have that property or building to ensure that you earn some rentals. So if you are going to earn rentals from that property, which means that it is going to be considered as an investment property. How it is going to get identified as an investment property? Because you are going to get a future economic benefit. But let's look at the computers that are being used by the banks. Now there will be tellers, there will be front counter staff. Now what are they doing? They will be performing the transactions in the computers. And what are they doing actually? For every transaction they do, there is an economic benefit. Why? Either money is going to come in or it might go out. But using the computer, you have a future economic benefit, right? So when there is a future economic benefit that you can identify, definitely that will be recognized as an PPE. Secondly, the cost of the asset has to be measured reliably. So I told you, when you go to a showroom, You look at a computer or maybe a television, you know there is a price. So that price is what you are going to pay after negotiation or whatever. The price will be similar, somewhat similar to that you are going to pay. So if that is the case, that is going to be the cost of the asset. That is going to be the cost of the asset. So the cost can be measured reliably. If so, you will recognize the PPE. These recognition criteria apply to subsequent expenditure as well. Please, if you have the handout, I underline the word subsequent expenditure. Very, very important. Subsequent expenditure. These recognition criteria apply to subsequent expenditure as well as costs incurred initially. Now, this is very important. Now, whenever we go and spend money on a particular asset, which is a PPE, where it enhances the useful life of the asset. Okay, you have to be very careful here. Whenever you go and do a modification or an extension of an asset, if that expenditure is going to earn you or make the asset have a extended useful life, then that expenditure can be considered as part of the cost. Right? Now let me give you an example. You have a building, and in that building you are operating. So very sooner you are thinking about expanding your business. Expanding means, like you are trying to grow your business. Now with the expansion, you know that you need more space. The current space is not sufficient. In the building that you are operating, which is your own building, in that building, the space is not sufficient. So what you are proposing is to put up a small extension sorry, to the building. Now this extension, it can't just happen. You have to spend cement, there will be brick, there will be iron rods, so many things, there will be expenses. So you need to spend money to put up this additional office space that you expect. So once you put up, what is going to happen? You are going to again look at the criteria where there is a economic benefit that you are expecting, and the cost of the asset is the expense that you incur to put up the additional office space. So both the criteria are matched. So since both the criteria are matched, now you are going to have an expense which is part of your cost. Which is part of your cost. So what has actually happened? You have done a value addition to your existing asset. You have done a value addition to your existing asset. So any value addition can be considered as part of your costs. Any value addition that you do to a particular asset can be considered as part of your cost. Now, I am looking at the same example in a different manner. Okay. Now look at this example. There is a building in which you are operating. The building was constructed about 10 years ago, or maybe say 5 years ago. So the building is very much discolored now. It doesn't look very well. The company looks very ugly, the outer. So you decided to color wash the entire building. You are going to paint the entire building. And it is at a big cost. Let's say 2 million to paint the entire building. Now the question is, this is a subsequent expenditure. This is a subsequent expenditure. Now my question to you is whether you can consider this as a cost or not. What do you say? whether you will consider this as part of your cost or not. Color washing the building. What do you think? No answers? Or have you answered in the chat box? No answers. What do you think? Is it going to be a cost of the building or not? So one person says not a cost, some say yes, some say it's a maintenance cost. Yes. Now the big question is, what is the value addition that you have done? So the big question is that whenever you want to recognize a subsequent expenditure as part of your cost, what is the value addition that you have done? Now by color washing the building, there is no value addition. Okay, because the customers who comes to your company is not looking at how the company look like. They come to you because of the products and services that you offer. Okay, so by color washing the building, you have not done any value addition to the building. You have not done any value addition to the building. So as one person mentioned, it is going to be considered as a maintenance cost. A maintenance cost. You can't capitalize that expenditure as part of your cost of the asset. Cost of the asset. So very, very important. I can give you many examples. Let us look at another example. You buy a vehicle. You use it for 3 years. Right? After using it for 3 years, you have come to a situation where one of the wheels you have to replace. So the wheel costs you around, say, 45,000. I'm just taking an example. Now you have to incur 45,000 to replace this wheel. Okay. Now, can you consider this as a cost of the vehicle? That is the question. If you say yes, you need to explain why. If you say no, still you have to explain why. So what is your answer? What do you think? Replacing the tire of a vehicle, does it or can it be considered as part of your cost? Yes or no? Yes, one person says it's a repairing cost. So repairing cost means now you have to understand the basic behind this. When you look at this vehicle, by replacing the tire, there is no value addition to the vehicle. Okay, because already there was a wheel. Now with that wheel, you couldn't run. So that's why you are replacing it. So ideally speaking, if you have not done any value addition, you can't consider it as part of your cost. If you want to consider it as part of your cost, then you need to remove the original cost of the tire from the asset. Okay. So when we go and buy a vehicle, we never look at how much of each component is costing us. Say if you buy a vehicle for 5 million, you don't go and ask, no, how much is the tires, how much is the engine? We don't ask like that. So basically we go and buy the vehicle. If it is 5 million, we pay 5 million and buy it. But when you are replacing it, then If you want to consider it as part of your cost, then you need to identify the initial cost of the wheel or the tire and remove it first. Then only you can add the new cost. So basically what we do is, any of these type of expenses that we do are normally considered as maintenance expenses. Maintenance, you have to remember, maintenance is the word. All these type of expenses are considered as maintenance expenses. Maintenance expenses. Okay. So unless there is a value addition, you should not recognize subsequent expenditure as part of your cost. Right. So now you have purchased an asset. So you know at the initial measurement, that is when you bring it to the business on day one, what do? What are the things that you can consider as the cost? Look at the items. Sorry. Look at the items. Purchase price, less any trade discount or rebate, import duties and non-refundable purchase taxes, directly attributable cost of bringing the asset to working condition, initial estimate of the unavoidable cost of dismantling and removing the asset. So I'll give you a simple example. You want to bring down a machine from abroad, from a foreign country, you want to bring down an asset or machine. So if you consider all these expenses are there except for the last one, you will have a purchase price, the seller might offer you a discount. Then if you want to bring down it from abroad, there will be an import duty, there could be non-refundable purchase taxes, then there could be directly attributable costs of bringing the asset to the working place. That is, you might have to bring it from a faraway place. So what happens? You need to bring it by way of transportation. Then you might also want to have insurance also, because you can't just bring it, because on the way if it gets damaged, then you don't have anything. So as a result, what you need to do? You need to take insurance also for that. Now sometimes if the machine is coming from abroad through the sea, if it is coming in a ship, you have to take insurance. Marine insurance have to be taken. So all these are expenses and part of your cost of the asset. Okay, it is not directly the price that you pay. Now when you buy a television, it's very straightforward. For a television you pay a price, so it will just that amount. There is no import duty or non-refundable purchase tax, because all those are included into the purchase price of your asset. That's why we don't consider those. But when it comes to a large machinery or some imported items, all these items, additional expenses are coming in. Okay, so you have to be very careful when you are ascertaining the cost of the asset. The cost of the asset will include all these items. And when do you recognize this? At the initial measurement date, that is on day one, right? When that is on day one. Day one means when you initially bring in the asset to the business. And as mentioned by earlier, the following costs will not be part of the cost of the PPE. What are those? Administration and other general overheads, startup and similar pre-production costs. Say for example, you bring down a machine to produce, let's say, garments. Now what do you do when you go bring in the machine? You bring it and install it in here, and then before you start using it, you have to do some test runs, because if it is not producing the garment as it is expected, then there is no point. So what do? You will do some test runs. The test runs will be considered as pre-production costs. Pre-production costs, because you will use some material, there will be some wear and tear on the machine. So all those are considered to be pre-production costs. Then by using the machine prior to the commencement, there will be losses also, because it won't give you any profit. You can't sell those garments, whatever that you produce. So basically, that will be the initial operating losses before the asset reaches the planned performance. So all of these will be recognized as an expense rather than an asset. So you have to be very clear with the differentiation of recognizing it as an expense versus recognizing it as an asset. Okay, because end of the day, there is an expenditure that you are going to incur. So the question is whether you are going to charge it to your P&L or not. Charging it to your P&L means it's an expense. If you capitalize it, it will be considered as an asset. So the differentiation between asset and an expenditure has to be clearly understood. So this is what I already explained. Expenditure incurred in replacing or renewing a component of an item or property, plant and equipment must be recognized in the carrying amount of the item, provided the original amount can be derecognized. Okay, so we call that as derecognition. The carrying amount of the replaced item must be re-recognized. Right, subsequent measurement. Subsequent measurement is now similar to the valuation that we did under investment property. So you are on day one, which is the day that you brought in the asset. Subsequent measurement is the next reporting date. Next reporting date. So on the next reporting date, how you will consider this asset in your books. That is what we are trying to understand. So the standard offers two different options here. How you can do this, right? So probably you have the option of keeping it at cost or revaluing it. And as we done in the investment properties, you have two options, or rather two models. One is known as the cost model. The second one is known here as revaluation model. I can remember someone asked me last week about the revaluation. So I told you revaluation is considered under LKS 16. Fair value model is considered under LKS 41. You have to have the clear difference. Investment property goes under fair value model. LKS 16 goes under revaluation model. So what do you mean by that? Conceptually, it is the same. Conceptually, it is the same, because we are going to use the fair value for this purpose. But the exception is the terms that we use. There it was cost model and fair value model. Here we call it as cost model and revaluation model. Revaluation model. So what do you mean by these two? Cost model, carry the asset at its cost less any accumulated depreciation. So there was no depreciation involved. Now here there is a depreciation. So that is why we say the carrying amount of the asset is its cost minus any accumulated depreciation, because over the useful life of the asset, you are going to depreciate. Over the useful life of the asset, you are going to depreciate. So if you are going to depreciate every year, the value of the asset is going to come down. Value of the asset is going to come down. So that's why the carrying value will be cost minus accumulated depreciation. In the case of a revaluation model, you will carry the asset at the revalued amount, which is known as the fair value, at the date of the revaluation. But what will happen thereafter? Again, you have to depreciate until you do another revaluation. Okay, so let's look at an example. Say for example, you buy a building. You buy a building today, 2021. So you keep it, let's say 10 million. The building is 10 million. And every year you depreciate. So every year you depreciate by 1 million, let's say. So 2021, you depreciate 1 million. So now the value of the building is 9 million when you go to the next year. In 2022, you depreciate another 1 million. So now the building value is 8 million by the end of 2022. Now by the end of 2022, you revalue the asset. So when you take the fair value of the asset, let's say the building is worth 12 million. So now what happens? You will take the 8 million worth building into 12 million. And that will be the new value for your depreciation. Okay. So in order to depreciate an asset, it's very important that you have the useful life of the asset. So this is again going to be used by the judged by the management for depreciation purposes. Then when you are estimating the useful life, you can consider the following: expected physical wear and tear, obsolescence. Obsolescence means how often it gets outdated. I told you about the mobile phones. If the mobile phones are getting outdated once in every 2 years, then that needs to be considered. Say for example, iPhones. Let's consider an example of iPhones. What happens? iPhones every year by September, they introduce a new model, right? Every year by September of that particular year, they introduce a new model, right? So recently they introduced a model. What was that? Anyone know? i13. So likewise, what happens when the model changes or new models coming in, like in the case of a mobile phone, you have to consider those when you are expecting the useful life or estimating the useful life. Very, very important. That is what called as obsolescence. How often this gets outdated. Then there could be legal or other limits on the use of the asset, right? Sometimes there might be assets, but you are not permitted to use, right? Say you might have a building close by a river. I think I told you this example. So sometimes the people in that area does not want you to use that building for any purposes, business purposes. So because you are using it for some chemical production, let's say, so the waste of that is going to go into the river. So the people around might not allow you to use that building for any business purposes because it is harmful to the environment. So there could be a legal or other limitations on the asset. The useful life should be reviewed at least every financial year, and depreciation rates adjusted for the current and future periods if it varies significantly. So what is mentioned here is, whenever you think the useful lives are going to change, because you are required to review. Now here it says every financial year, but probably I would say at least once in 3 years you need to review your useful lives. So once you review, if you think that the useful life has to be increased or reduced, depending on that, what will happen? The depreciation rate also will change. So if the depreciation rate also will change, what is going to happen? The depreciation is going to change. The depreciation is going to change. So that will have an impact on your P&L. Right. Then we come to the topic on depreciation policy. What do you mean by depreciation policy? So during the class today, we looked at several examples: depreciation rates, useful lives. So companies will have to say what is the policy that they want to adopt. Say for buildings, they might use 4%. Sometimes some may use 2%. So what do you mean by that? Buildings are assets of long time. So you don't depreciate a building in 2 years or 5 years. It doesn't make sense. So if you think a building can be used for over a period of 50 years, your depreciation rate will be obviously 2%. But subsequent to review, if you say that your building can only be used for 40 years, what will happen? The depreciation rate has to be increased. When you lower the useful life, the rate goes up. Okay, that is how it works. I told you, showed you on screen. So you have to be very careful with regard to the depreciation policy, because you have to review your useful life or the depreciation rate at least once in 3 years and incorporate them into your policy. So various methods can be used for depreciating the assets, or maybe say considering factors such as the effect of obsolescence, repairs and maintenance. All those have to be mentioned in your policies. So consideration in depreciation policy could be to recover the cost of the fixed assets, creating funds to replace the asset in future, to determine the correct profit. These are the 3 important elements that you need to consider in your depreciation policy. How you are going to recover the cost of the fixed asset, and how you will allocate funds to replace them, and you want to determine the correct profit, because when you make use of an asset, there is wear and tear. So that you need to account. Okay, right. So what I want you to do is, now we are going into the depreciation methods. I'm not going to do it now since we have already reached 5:20, 5:30. I want you to go through the financial statements of few companies and find out where their depreciation policy is mentioned. Under accounts, the financial statements, you will find the policies. I think I have already shared some of the financials of some companies, but I didn't include the entire policy. So I have given only part of it. So you can go to the respective companies or any other company and look at what is their accounting policy. In that accounting policy, you can go through the depreciation policy. Okay, depreciation policy. And I want you to find out what are the depreciation rates or useful lives used by companies for various types of assets. Okay, various types of assets. You are going to find out that for me. Next week, when we start, before we start, we will have a look at those, and then we will continue with the depreciation methods. Okay, right. Do you have any?
So one more question. Now we talked about property, plant, and equipment. So
Yes.
when we talk about properties, now it normally includes land and building. Normally buildings, yes, now we can calculate depreciation. But when we talk about lands, normally the value appreciates. No, we don't depreciate lands, no, sir.
Yeah, so I was about to tell it on next class, but you have asked that question. Good. So when it comes to the type of asset, that's why I wanted you all to go through the policy, right? Anyway, so good that you asked the question. When you talk about property, it includes land and building, right? But land value, you know, generally it appreciates, right? So as a result, we don't depreciate a land. Land values remain as it is in the books, but you can revalue them. We don't depreciate them. But buildings, since there is wear and tear, we need to depreciate them. Okay. So land, we don't depreciate, but the land value may appreciate or depreciate. So we capture that change when we do the revaluation. Okay. So the land value, changes in the land value are captured in the revaluation. Have I answered your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right. So we'll stop there. If you have any more questions, you can ask. Otherwise, others can leave.